Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday to you. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. I apologize for just peeling and treading like a snake. I apologize about that. I was down in the sun and got a little too sunburned. So sorry about that, but appreciate you joining me today. We got a ton of topics that we're going to get into. What happened to Jack Jones, the draft, a lot more. So let's just dig into it. First one comes to us from Michael O. Hey, Hondo, first of all, it was nice to see your lovely wife on your podcast recently reading emails for you to answer. Talk about a better half. No doubt I'm in the same position in my life. Uh, Good for you, buddy. Shannon is my much better half. I am in please send her my best wishes. You just did. It should be clear that the Raiders are not in a hurry in this draft to get their next quarterback. It is clear. Do they keep the pick? Do they keep the pick and the best player available, whether it's offense upgrade or defense? Or is the thinking to trade down, adding more picks? The question is based on how much the Raiders need more depth in play now players. Me, I see a volume of players of good character, athletic ability, big and physical as the targets, which I see as a must in the Spy Tech Carroll philosophy that seems to come out uh, in every interview. Michael O. So, a couple of things. We've talked about this at great length. There are a handful of players that the Raiders would love to get at six. And I feel pretty confident that they'll have that ability to get one of them. However, um, after a couple of them are off the board, they would certainly listen to trades. Uh, and if they can upgrade, there is nothing wrong with upgrading. And I think that they would love to trade down and get more picks if it makes sense. And again, it all goes back to the value of the player on the board. If the value of the player on the board is of significance, like last year, where Brock Bowers was going to hit them at 13 and they had a number one overall grade on him. Well, they just weren't going to trade that pick. If Brock wouldn't have been there, they would have possibly done it, traded back a little bit and still gotten Talise Fuaga. They wanted Talise, Joe Alt, or Brock Bowers, not in that order, but that was how they felt last year. So it's all relative based on who's on the board and what are people offering if they want to sell. The next one comes us from Glenn E. in Staffs of the United Kingdom. Hi, Hondo. You've spoken a few times about bad drafting teams leading up to the draft. My two favorite sayings in holder poker are you can't spot if you can't spot the fish at the table in the first 10 minutes, it's you. And next, play the man, not the cards. How much are the Raiders looking to leverage from the bad decisions of other teams in the draft? Yeah, I've talked about this ad nauseum. They want to. Um, there are a couple of players that may get to the Raiders. One of them, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell of getting to them. One, I think there is a chance, probably not. Um, I would say two that are probably not a solid chance of getting to them. I don't think either one will, but could. And because of bad drafting. Okay. Matter of fact, let's just go a little bit of a different direction. I think there are three guys that if they get to the Raiders at six, it's nothing short of bad drafting. That said, um, I think there are a couple of other guys that they would be very comfortable at six taking if they couldn't make a trade. So absolutely, they want to leverage. I said this over a month ago. Unless somebody really blew their socks off, which they could, I don't anticipate the Raiders doing a trade until draft night. They want to see who's there. If somebody blows the roof off the table, they would. But yeah, it is all about leveraging other people's really bad mistakes. That's a great email. Thank you so much. Next comes from Travis C. Hi, Hondo. Appreciate all of your work, and I've gone back and rewatched some of your old videos in hindsight of what the Raiders have done this offseason. You've been spot on. Do you think the Raiders could still take Mason Graham or Will Campbell at 6 if they get there? If not, do you think they take Gene T at 6 or trade down and select him or possibly Jalen Walker? Keep up the great work, Travis C. So I let me go through this because you ask a lot of questions and I don't mind answering them. Obviously, this is a question and answer podcast, but you can't just ask the question because there are 5 picks. So let's go. Do I think the Raiders could still take Mason Graham or Will Campbell at 6? Absolutely, I do. I think they could. Okay. Uh, if not, do you think they take Gene T at 6 or trade down or possibly Jalen Walker? Yes, and yes. Mhm. They love Jalen Walker and they love Gene T. There are lots of guys here that they really like. I'm going to tell you this: Jalen Walker, I don't think he's the best player in this draft. I think he could be, but Jalen Walker is a really good, he's a great player. Not a dude, although there are a few teams that have him at dude level. Um, Not a dude, but he is an elite player. And I had someone say to me recently, matter of fact, I'm trying to remember in my head. I got to count something here real quick. One, two, three. Yeah, I had someone say to me, if Jalen Walker gets out of the top 7, it is NFL drafting malfeasance. Just he's that good. He's that good. But because there are a lot of bad drafting teams, he could fall. Um, I had a person tell me at the owners' meetings, he said, I've got Cam Ward as best quarterback in this class, and the only other guy I have with a first round grade at quarterback is Jackson Dart. And he said, and if I'm sitting there and I'm Tennessee, I'm not letting Abdul Carter go by. I'm not even, and he told me, he named a few players because I'm not taking Cam Ward over any of these guys. He goes, and I think Cam's the best one in this draft, and I have a first round grade on him, but I don't have him graded as high as these guys. I thought that was interesting. And Jalen Walker was one of them. Jalen Walker is a stud. Just go put his video on. Good question there from Travis C. Next one is from Neil A. in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Hi, Hondo. Over the years, I've suffered watching too many of the Raiders' top draft picks fail. What's the secret to transitioning from college to NFL starter? Uh, is it down to to coaching received at the NFL team? Is it down to system fit, the player's work ethic, intelligence, physical ability? Why have the Raiders had such a bad draft history in the past? Um, in the last 15 years, I'd say they've had 3 good draft classes and have witnessed way too many first round gambles and downright ridiculous picks. I'm tired of being in a perpetual rebuild mode. Thanks from Belfast, Northern Ireland, Neil A. Um, the Raiders have made some absolutely ridiculous picks, falling in love with shiny things. At times, I think thinking they're the smartest person in the room. There are several keys that go into success. And I got your question and I talked with a few people. I talked to 2 actually people that I wanted their opinion who are directly involved in the drafting process for NFL teams. And I just asked them, can you give me some points that you think, and both of these gentlemen are considered excellent drafters. And the first thing is you make a mistake when you ignore a person's brain. Now, I know that sounds simple, but it's not. So please let me explain. Now, this comes from 2 highly successful at drafting general managers. Football is a game that requires you to think. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be a brain surgeon, but you have to have a very high football IQ. I know some guys that most of us would probably not consider smart who have enormous football IQs. They grasp and understand the game. They grasp and they understand the game. So that's the first one. I had one GM say to me, if I can't trust a guy's brain, I can't trust a guy. Next is everybody at this level has physical ability, but that brain sets it apart. Now, NIL has helped the NFL because now these guys have money in their pocket. And it used to be guys would get to the NFL and um, you never knew how they were going to change when they had money in their pocket. So they get money in their pocket now in college, so you get a good idea, and that's a very, very big thing. Then the next point that you have to really look at is work ethic. A lot of guys, their goal is to get to the NFL. So let me give you an example. We'll use family as an example. My father and mother, they met, and 2 weeks later, they were married. My mom was 16 years old. Um, Obviously, a different time, clearly a different time, but many, many years ago. But my father used to always tell us, date and pursue your wife the way you did before you were married. But a lot of people, the goal is marriage, so they get married, they expect to live happily ever after. So when reality hits, you have to continue to pursue and put your marriage as a priority like you did when you were dating. So follow me where I'm going with this. A lot of guys, their dream is to get to the NFL. And so they get there, they get the money in their pocket, they buy the cars. I was recently speaking, I was asked to speak to a group of college athletes. And I talked about, if your goal is to be successful in playing professional sports, then make your goal your second contract. I tell every rookie who asks, and I know a lot of players, don't buy anything. Don't go buy a car. If you want to buy mom and dad, depending, maybe if you're a first rounder, but don't buy anything. Put your money away because, most people don't understand the enormous tax that you pay at that level of income. And, and so I know guys who go out. I know one player in particular who was a high first round pick. And literally just a couple years after being in the league, one team was going to cut him and pursue a return of the signing bonus. And I'll never forget this. Standing in the bottom of a stadium, an opponent's stadium, he said to me, I ain't got nothing left. All I got left is this necklace. And it was a big necklace and it was white gold, and his number and his was all in diamonds. And he goes, this cost me 180,000. It's the only thing I got left. The team never got a dime of his signing bonus left, but he spent everything he had. And so I tell every player, save every dime you make. You get to eat every day at the facility. You get so much swag. You don't need to buy clothes. I don't have his permission. I don't think he'd care, but I don't have his permission, so I won't tell you this. But Shannon, I have a very good friend who was a perennial Pro bowler, played in the league for more than 10 years, who drove a Ford Explorer. And he had two parents that were teachers that made $45,000 each a year. So his first contract, he did commercials for an apartment building, lived in an apartment, drove his Ford Explorer. Do you know he never bought a car? He drove that Ford Explorer the whole time he was in the league, stayed in his apartment. Then when he got married, he did finally buy a house, but it was just a normal house. And when after many, many years in the NFL, and the man had an enormous amount of wealth, and retired. Then him and his wife built a very gorgeous home. In fact, we stayed in it recently. Um, and but it's a beautiful home. But he understood, that the money doesn't last forever. That is a big deal. And so a lot of guys get to the league and that was their dream. A lot of guys do not understand because football maybe was easy for them in high school, and then it was easy for them in college, and then they get to the pros. Everybody's good. I've told you this story. My buddy TJ Duckett, he was the number one recruit in America coming out of high school as a linebacker and a running back. Goes to Michigan State. I mean, the guy is a big-bodied human being, runs a 4.3. Um, he's lightning quick, big, huge back, gets drafted first overall by Atlanta. And I asked him one time, what was the biggest thing you learned getting to the NFL? He goes, I had never in my career ever been caught from behind. And, that first week of pads in Atlanta, I get tackled and I wanted to look and see who tackled me from the back. And it was a defensive lineman. And I realized I ain't in high school anymore. And so there are a lot of things, but it's maturity, a brain, a work ethic, and understanding, this is what makes Max Crosby great. His dream was not to get to the NFL. His dream was not to be a millionaire. His dream was to get generational wealth, which is not just a millionaire. You can be a millionaire and not have generational wealth. But his dream was to be the greatest. So every new contract, Max plays better. And there are rare guys like that. And that's hard to find. And getting into someone's mental space and learning them is the biggest key in the NFL draft. The next set is from Jordan Y in Roseville, California. Hey, Hondo, my question is about the franchise tag. I'm fascinated by it and was wondering if you could shed some light on when or why it came into the league. Is it a good or bad thing for a player to get tagged? Um, Let me just say a couple things. It came into the league because they wanted teams to be able to protect if they had a player, a Joe Montana, a Tom Brady, a Max Crosby, a Patrick Mahomes. And so they take literally just the top paid people, average them, the very elite top, and you get paid that amount. Um, you ask, how is it received? Well, first of all, it should be received as great respect, number one. But a lot of players are very angry with it, and it's not about the money. So let's say you get tagged at a position that it's a $35 million tag. Okay. And so people would think, oh my God, they're going to be thrilled. They get 35 million. Well, not if they could have got 3 years, 90 million with 50 guaranteed. You see how that works? And so a lot of guys are okay with it, but a lot are angry. And that's the reason why. And that's how it came about, was to allow teams to just protect that one. Every team has that one. Usually good teams have more, but if you're the Chiefs, who's the one guy you can't afford to lose? Patrick Mahomes. If you're the Raiders, who's your number one player? Okay, Max. But what if Brock Bowers continues to play at his level? Now, hopefully you hope you can get at least one guy extended so you have a franchise tag. But my point is, it's to protect that guy. You just can't, you cannot afford to lose. That's how it got going. Next is from Brandon C in Utah. Hondo, hello, my favorite, most realist dude out there. Thank you. Keep up the good work. I haven't heard much about Jordan, about Jade Barron. Sorry. To me, he fits Carroll's past vision like a glove. This guy is an Earl Thomas clone, but possibly more versatile. Not hearing any talk of him, and I wonder why. I feel that it's a strong possibility in the draft, but I'm curious if you have any downside to him and if you think he'd fit our current scheme. Thanks as always. Keep up the good work. Brandon C. Now, Brandon, let's talk about this for a minute. He has short arms, and there are concerns about his tackling and his ability to cover verticals, as well as some man issue coverages. Okay. Again, this is a guy that's done a lot. I talked with a couple of scouts to get their opinion, and they said he's going to be a boom or bust. Um, and I thought that was fascinating. So, yeah, I think he does fit um, with a lot of schemes. Uh, I have obviously haven't talked to Patrick Graham about him, but in Patrick Graham's system where they rely on man coverage, I think that Patrick would have to be 100% convinced that he would fit because one of his weaknesses is man, and Patrick likes his corners on an island. So there you go with that. You ask, and there you go, my friend. Um, Hondo or Howdy Hondo. Um, Howdy Hondo, thank you for actively trying to keep politics out of your program. We may or may not share some of our political beliefs, but respectfully, it doesn't matter. I'm here for Raiders news. Best, Rusty C and SoCal. I agree with you, Rusty. The other night, my wife and I were listening to something, and it wasn't sports, but we were listening to something, it wasn't news either. And somebody wanted to interject politics. And you want to know what was amazing? It was something politically that her and I agree with, but we got rid of it. I don't care. Politics has gotten into everything. Now, listen, I think politics is very important, but you don't tune into me for that, and I don't tune into you for that. I laugh how people are losing friendships over politics. I talked with a guy recently who hasn't spoken to his daughter because she disagrees with his politics. And I looked at him and go, are you kidding me? You won't talk to your daughter because of her politics. And by the way, I agree with the daughter. I said, are you kidding me? That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I love my children. I wouldn't turn my back on my children for decisions they made. You say, well, what if they murdered somebody? I'd turn them in, but I'd be going to the prison to see them. I love them. But give me a break. You're absolutely right, Rusty. I agree. No place for it. It will not appear in this podcast. There's no place for it. And I think any media personality putting politics in there is just stupid. It's complete stupid. There you go. Next one comes from Manuel O. Hondo, what has impressed you most about the new Raiders leadership? Oh, I love this question, Manuel. Couple things. By the way, let me know if your name is actually Emmanuel. That's one of my favorite words. Just curious because I've met a couple of Emmanuels and they go by Manuel, but I love that name, Emmanuel. In fact, I considered naming one of my sons that Emmanuel, or at least giving him a middle name. Um, I have been incredibly impressed with a couple of things. Y'all know how much I've always respected John Spytek. And so I'm not surprised by anything John Spytek's done. A little surprised that Rob Spillane got away, but I understand why he did. Because John hadn't been here and there'd been so much instability in the organization. I told you before, I don't blame John for that. I blame the circumstance. But nothing with John Spytek has even remotely surprised me. I think he has got a chance to be here for a super long time. Um, Super long time and to be an iconic franchise guy. I think there's some things that could potentially hurt him that are nothing to do with him. But I think if John Spytek is allowed to run it, and he has been up to now, I think that he's going to be super good. But as far as the leadership as a whole, there's a couple of things. Um, I've been very impressed with Tom Brady's willingness and ability to listen. That has even surprised some people in the building. Um, John Spytek is absolutely fearless when it comes to Tom Brady. Now, I learned this when he was in Tampa, and I've talked to people in the building about it since. And I've even mentioned this to John. Um, I think that Tom Brady's voice should be enormously loud, and it is. But I don't think anyone not having people in the room who will tell them, I disagree with you, you're wrong, is smart. Now, you have to be united outside of that room. I'll never forget, I had a Rick Goslin, who is considered by many the greatest NFL writer of all time. I certainly consider him that. He is the best NFL writer to ever write about the National Football League. He is the inventor of the mock draft, although he would say perfecter. We completely disagree on that. That's because of his humility. Um, and he's my mentor, and he is my not my friend. He's my dear friend. I love Rick Goslin. I genuinely love him. Um, Rick Goslin once told me, when you start hearing about division in a team, then you know that team's in trouble. Okay, I'll give you an example. My wife and I went out to dinner one night with a couple a few years ago. It was a new couple that we'd met. They had moved into our neighborhood. We wanted to be nice. We invited them to dinner. We go to dinner. And we are 10 minutes, 20 minutes into dinner, and she was complaining about her husband. And later, he complained. So we dropped them off, dinner was over, and as soon as the door shuts and we pull out of their driveway and we start to head towards our house, I look at her, she looks at me, and she's like, "They're not gonna make it." And I said, "Not a chance." Because once you start hearing about division, why? Because every couple has disagreements. Every couple has. That's just part of life. Two people can't live in the same house without having different opinion unless one of them holds everything in, and that's not healthy. But when others start hearing about it, you know there's trouble. And I have been stunned at how well this Raider leadership team is able to disagree with one another. And I've heard it um, not because people out complaining about the disagreement, but talking about, yeah, I really listened to so and so and it made sense. You know, they're crediting other, they're not sharing dissent, they're sharing input. There's a difference. There's a difference. Oh, my husband's an idiot, or my wife's an idiot, or my husband disagreed with me and I listened, or my wife disagreed with me. And you know what? Man, she was right. I can't tell you the number of times Shannon has come up to me and she said, what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate that. Let's do that. Okay. And so when you hear about it in a constructive way, it's very much a positive because they're building others up. But when you hear about it in other ways, you know the franchise is in trouble. I have been surprised, but not shocked, because I knew Spytek and I knew his character. If Spytek is ever ticked off at Brady, no one will ever know about it. That's just his character. Uh, Pete Carroll. I mean, you look at what happened to him in Seattle. And by the way, him and John Schneider have a great relationship, the general manager. Um, Yet Pete's never said anything but a great word about the entire organization. I would never expect an ill word about John, but the entire organization. Those are people of character. Tom Brady, you never hear him trash people. I mean, ever. That's just not how he operates. Now, when he was a player, he would talk trash, but I'm saying, and so I'm not shocked because that is the character of the men involved. But it's been surprising how open people have been. Like when Pete Carroll goes to Spytech and then they talk to Tom Brady about Geno. I have been very surprised again at how much they have been collaborative. I think that's really cool. I think if you're a Raider fan, that is really, really cool. And good question, Manuel. The next one from Peter W. Hondo, do you feel like the team has turned a corner? What must you see to feel like the team has turned the page? That's a tough question because I learned this a long time ago. The person who determines the definition of words will always win an argument. And that depends on how you define turning a corner. So there are some that'll say, the Raiders have turned the corner when they get above 500. There'll be some that'll say, the Raiders have turned a corner when they win a playoff game or get in the playoffs. Some will say when they can win 3 games in a row, whatever that may be. I don't know how you define turning a corner. So let me go back and um, how have they turned a corner? So do I think things are being done differently? Yes. Although Tom Telesco did a super job this time last year, but things are being different. Uh, so I think there are a lot of reasons for optimism if you're a Raider. Um, I personally have never been as high on the Raiders in their future as I am for this season. Mm, correction. I have never been in my sixth season as high on the Raiders' future as I am. And when I said this season, I meant this time, not this coming just 2025 year season. I have never been as optimistic about the Raiders as I am right now in their future. I mean, you're getting a John Spytek, getting a Pete Carroll, having a person who is a perfectionist and willing to put the time in like Tom Brady is monstrous. I am a buyer on the direction of this franchise. Absolute buyer. Um, and I think it's a good time. So I don't know how you define turning a corner. And remember that he who defines, or she, I guess, who defines um, he or she who defines the words defines the argument. So since you didn't define the word and didn't give me a parameter, I can't answer that. I can just tell you I've my optimism for the future. Hondo, what happened to Jack Jones, Terry C? So a couple of things. And for the absolute keeping it real, I know that Jack Jones has had some issues in his life. Okay. I am not going to change. I like Jack Jones and I like him a lot. And I think he's incredibly talented. When you look at what he did at the second half of 2023, he was the best corner in the National Football League. He thrived in the environment of discipline that he got from Antonio Pierce, and then consequently, because of the faith that Pierce had in Patrick Graham, he thrived in that atmosphere, and he did really, really well. 2024, the discipline that got Antonio Pierce the job was not part of the Raiders organization. And I believe it was catastrophic on the career of Jack Jones. And so I think, in fact, I was just asked recently by an NFL executive, What's your take on Jack Jones?" I said, "I love the guy." And I told him exactly what kind of environment I felt like Jack thrives in. And he said, "All right." And I know that they're looking at signing Jack. And I understand why he's not with the Raiders. And I can't blame the Raiders for that. I can't. But in the right system, Jack Jones would be good. But I don't think it's fair to say the organization in totality, but the Raiders organization's lack of leadership of discipline last year, people don't thrive in that. I'll give you an example. I met a guy one time who got in trouble when he was 18, and the judge gave him two choices. He could enlist in the Marines or go to jail. So the guy, rather than go to jail for 30 days, enlisted in the Marines for 4 years. And when he left the Marines after 20 years is when I got to meet him. It was actually just coming up on his 20th year when we first started to become friends. And I asked him, did you always want to be a Marine? What made you decide to go in the Marines? So he tells me this story, and he goes, I lacked discipline in my life. And I was a troublemaker. A lot of things happened in my life because I lacked discipline. He goes, and then when I got in the Marines, I thrived. I thrived. And he goes, and every time my parents are like, you need to reenlist. You need to reenlist. You're doing well. And he goes, finally now, after I've been married for several years and I have a young family and I understand I have trained myself to be disciplined. He goes, now I know I can live outside of of the Marines and be successful. I thought that was fascinating. I heard a guy tell a story one time on television. I don't remember what the show was, or I'd credit it, but he talked about he got out of jail. He'd been in jail for 12 years and was a perfect citizen. In fact, got early out of his punishment because he'd been a perfect citizen and got on the streets and said he went right back to being undisciplined. So he did a crime, not one that was like murder or really hurt another individual. He said, I wanted to go back to prison. I remember I was watching this on television and I just about fell out of my chair. Um, he said, I needed the discipline of prison. It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not saying that Jack's a prison guy. I'm just saying that some people need a strong discipline situation like my buddy needed the Marines. And you know this, some companies, people can work at home and they get all their work done. Some people, they need to be in that office where somebody's watching them. I'll never forget a couple of years ago, a buddy of mine told me he had a relative that worked from home and they could tell if your mouse was moving and if you were working. So he bought this little thing that moved his mouse every once in a while so he could walk away from his computer until they somehow developed a software that they could understand that the mouse really wasn't moving. It was fake. Some people can do great working at home because they're self-motivated. Some can't. And I just think the environment change in 2024 really hurt Jack. I wish him nothing but the best. Had a lot of really good talks with him man to man. Um, I am proud to know Jack Jones and I wish him nothing but the best. Uh, if he stays the man that I know him to be, I will always be proud to know him and care about him. And I wish him nothing but the best. Now, for those of you that don't like this next question, it's my last one, is nothing to do with Raiders football. So I'm warning you so you can turn it off. Comes to me from Constance. Constance L. Constance says, Hondo, I am about to get married and I bought the book you recommended, Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. I am going to be completely vulnerable and sound stupid. Having not had a dad because my father passed away when I was young, I cried multiple times in the book learning about being a man. It was so good. I really appreciate it. I asked my fiance to read it, and she did. I even now have bought copies like you have and given them to everybody that I know. Thank you for that book. Is there another book that you can recommend for a man like me who didn't have a dad? Or maybe in your case, you did have a great one, but another book to read. I am excited now about my journey into being a husband and eventually a father and trying to be all that God wants me to be. So, Constance, I do. And as you know, I emailed you, you gave me your address. So I bought this book for you. I'm going to drop it in the mail today, but it's called Letters from John D. Rockefeller to His Son. Letters from John D. Rockefeller to his son. It's a bunch of letters that John D. Rockefeller, who many consider one of the greatest businessmen of all time, a loving father, devoted husband, and a terrific man. And it's about his life. And he shares things with his son. He takes his son and he's vulnerable to his son. He shares things that are both good and bad. It's a tremendous book of fatherly advice, and it's from somebody who is extremely successful in business. So again, the book is entitled Letters from John D. Rockefeller to His Son, and literally written by Rockefeller because it's his book. But I love this book. I recently learned about this book within the last 2 years, bought it, loved it, bought a bunch. In fact, I've given copies to my kids and love it. It's great wisdom, and have given out a few, including the one I just gave you. So I hope that you enjoy it. I want to thank everybody for being with me today. Tomorrow's podcast is going to be very special. I think you're going to enjoy it. And then Thursday will be my next mock draft. Looking forward to that and a lot more. So thank you for joining me today. I wish all of you nothing but the best. God bless you and have a wonderful day. We'll see you again tomorrow.